lecture series. My name is Trey Duffy. I will be the MC today. I am a recent alumni of Kansas Wesleyan. I graduated in December of 2022 with a bachelor's in sports management and business management. I've been very heavily involved here at Kansas Wesleyan on the men's basketball team, the DECA team, SGA, SAC. Now I'm the graduate assistant for external relations here at Kansas Wesleyan, and so I work for Michelle Dolan, my lovely boss over there. And I'm working on my MBA. And I'm very excited to be the MC for today's lecture. So before we get started, this is how it's going to work. Each speaker is going to have 7 minutes to talk. We ask that everybody stay within these chairs. The people that are sitting next to the cameras, please be aware they will pick up everything you say. So please just keep it quiet. And so we will hear you. The people on the live stream will be able to hear you. And then Michelle will be our timekeeper over there. And so when you get to 6 minutes, her arm is going to go up. When it gets to 7, she's going to stand up, and then 8 minutes, somebody's going to come down and tase you from security. So we're not going to get to that point. So without further ado, and then at the end, we'll have 20 minutes to ask everybody questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, Charles Alt-Duell from KWU LC. Charles graduated from KWU in 2005 as a triple major in history, religion, philosophy, and criminal justice. He went on to graduate from Washington School of Law in 2008 and has been in private practice since 2014. He will be talking about estate planning such as wills, power of attorney, advanced directives, and living wills. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Alt-Duell.
Good morning. So I'm going to lead off with the boring stuff and talk about powers of attorney first. Powers of attorney are basically a way to designate someone else to act on your behalf. A lot of people think they need them. A lot of people talk about them and hear about them. Nobody really kind of understands what they are other than I'm going to help my mom or help my dad or do something for someone else. A power of attorney, like I said, is a stand-in. A power of attorney is someone who is subject to fiduciary duties, somebody who has the same, actually the way the law is being interpreted, the same kind of fiduciary duties that a licensed attorney has. As far as misappropriation of funds, personal liability for malfeasance, those kinds of things. It's a trap for the unwary. A lot of people just sign up thinking that they're going to help someone, but don't understand what it is that they're really putting on the line. Power of attorney has a couple of components. One of them, the way we like to do them is we have a financial component or a healthcare component. You can combine those two things, but the way that we like to set them up in our firm is one person who acts as your financial power of attorney and another person who acts as your healthcare power of attorney. We do that so that the person paying the loan isn't the one writing the checks. Make sure that there's no questions in writing, that sort of thing, and that the person who has to make kind of life decisions or healthcare decisions doesn't have to worry so much about how am I going to balance the checkbook at the same time. That's if you can do it that way. That's what we like to do. If you can't, you can combine those two things. And a lot of times, powers of attorney are not enough for planning to act on someone else's behalf. The other thing you most of the time need is an advanced directive or a living will. An advanced directive or a living will is just that. These are instructions I give to my powers of attorney or to my agents in advance of a healthcare crisis. And they can include elections for when do you pull the plug, what kind of comfort care do you receive before choosing to end life support services, those sorts of things. And the forms can be very complicated, they can be very simple. You can find them online and you get exactly what you pay for when you buy them online. You can buy them from the hospital, and the hospital would prefer that you use their forms, we've found, because then they know exactly what they say. The overriding idea for planning from an individual perspective is to make sure that the people who are helping you know what you want to do. The worst thing in the world is to be standing by the bedside with the family gathered, and maybe there's some estrangement among the siblings, maybe there's some money going on in the family background, and everybody's trying to figure out whether or not mom ought to continue to receive comfort care or mom ought to go ahead and make her transition. It's the worst kind of dynamic to experience, and proper planning ahead of time can help mitigate that. That'll never take away that kind of pain, doesn't take away that stress, but it can help reduce it. And as parents, as individuals who rely on family members or others, it's kind of our responsibility to make that easy make it easier for the people that we ask to help us, for them to do their jobs. So those are the kind of the purposes of power of attorney and living will. A lot of people then will come in and say, well, I need to get my will done. I need to get my will. And I think I might need a power of attorney as well. Wills are sort of catch-all instruments. They apply in place of statutory schemes, but most of the time people end up electing the same kind of distributions that the statute already provides for. I think that my colleague is going to talk more about trusts, so I'll steer away from that subject a little bit. But if you have enough money that you need to have a will to direct it, you probably need a trust and not a will. If you have a will, it's good to have a will in addition to a trust, because a will is a catch-all, it's a safety net. And most of the times, if you have a trust, a will direct whatever you left out of the trust back into the trust. And I don't mean to step on your toes, Eugene, but the other topic I want to make sure that we talk about is Medicaid planning. Medicaid planning is huge. It is becoming more and more prevalent issue, and as the baby boom generation starts to reach the age where we're passing retirement, we're starting to get up into our 60s and our 70s. Medicaid is a real thing, and the consequences of not doing appropriate Medicaid planning are that you will spend everything you own on the nursing home, and then sometimes Medicaid will come in after you die and take all the rest in the state recovery. So you can again avoid some of those consequences if you do appropriate advanced planning, but that advanced planning has to be really advanced. If you do any kind of transfers within the 5 years that you attempt to qualify for Medicaid, Medicaid will look back and recognize that transfer and say, you've got to spend that much money before you're going to qualify for Medicaid. So in other words, if I give my house to my kids and my house is worth $100,000, and then the next year I go into the nursing home, the Medicaid folks are going to say, you owe $100,000 before we start paying. And a lot of times that's kind of a trap of the unwary. It's something that people put off. Well, I'll be okay. My health is going to be fine. I'm going to stay out of the home as long as I can. The question of powers of attorney, wills, and trusts, and those kinds of things sometimes come up when the horse is already out of the barn. Now, the one tool that we have left in our belt that not a lot of people like to think about for Medicaid planning is divorce. Actually, you can use a divorce as a Medicaid planning tool and as an estate planning tool. There are lots of folks who are getting into that 70 and 80-year-old time range, date range, and starting to say, you know what, Medicaid planning, we didn't do it, so now we've got to protect the community spouse, the person who's not home, from having to spend down everything and basically impoverish the spouse through a divorce order, so that they can qualify for Medicaid, and then we start to do Medicaid planning. So, Michelle, I will surrender the floor. We're talking this more later.
Thank you, Charles. That was some great information about power of attorney and living will. Our next speaker is Julie Beswick. And she is from Advanced Trust Company. She's the Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer at the company. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting from the University of Illinois Chicago and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Kansas. She'll be talking about trust and long-term benefits to families. Ladies and gentlemen, Julie Beswick.
Great wealth transfer. So over the next 20 years, financial experts predict that over want their kids to become lazy or irresponsible. And overall, there's just a lack of trust in those lower generations by these parents and grandparents. Parents don't want to make their kids rich. That's not the only goal. The goal is to make sure that all the generations share in their wealth so they can help their kids, their grandkids, and even their great-grandkids. And we're seeing more and more parents and grandparents that are charitably inclined, more so than any generation prior. Wrong direction, sorry about that. So even the uber wealthy in the country are buying into this philosophy or believe this in this same philosophy. Many are going so far as to say that it's harmful to our kids if we leave them large inheritances. And Warren Buffett says that the perfect inheritance is leave your children enough so that they can do anything, but not enough that they can do nothing. So how do we accomplish these more complicated or complex wealth transfer plans? Through the use of trusts. So what's a trust? So in simple terms, a trust is a legal agreement among three parties. So you have a settlor who transfers property to a trustee who manages or administers that property for the benefit of a beneficiary. Now, the settlor also has to provide instructions to the trustee or a roadmap, so the settlor can tell the trustee how he or she wants the trustee to manage that property for the benefit of their beneficiaries. And these instructions are done in the form of a trust agreement or a trust document. And those instructions can be very broad or very narrow or specific. So let's talk about the benefits. So what benefits do trusts provide? So efficiencies and privacy of death. So there's no probate, right? So we don't have to wait for a judge to come in and give the administrator or the trustee the authority to start administering that property. Upon a death of the settlor or even the incapacitation, that trustee can come right in and they can start acting and managing that property. Trust can help in the reduction of income taxes and sheltering our assets from estate taxes. They can assist in family business succession planning. And most importantly, they can provide what I call protections from self and protections from others. So why might a beneficiary need to be protected from him or herself? Well, they might lack financial experience to manage a big pot of money, and they might just be a spendthrift. So by choosing the right trustee, that trustee can help educate that beneficiary, make them more financially savvy or financially stable, and provide a barrier so the assets of the prior generation aren't frittered away. And that's actually a very legitimate concern. Studies or history shows us that family wealth doesn't last past 3 generations. In fact, 70% of families will lose their entire wealth at the 2nd generation. So protections from others. When we're talking about protections from others, we primarily are referring to creditor protections. So a beneficiary might get sued. Maybe they're in a car accident and their alt may get sued, or maybe a beneficiary is being sued for malpractice and he or she's an attorney or a doctor. Those assets that are in that trust are protected, so they're not attachable, they're not collectible as part of that lawsuit. Divorce is the same. So if the assets are in a appropriately or properly drafted trust, they're protected from divorce property settlements. Scams, undue influence, those are some other things that trust can protect from. Let's talk about special needs trust. If you have a child or a grandchild with special needs, you may want to consider a special needs trust. Distributions from special needs trusts can enhance a special needs beneficiary's life without disqualifying them from their needs-based government assistance. So that's really important, because if a special needs beneficiary were to receive a lump sum inheritance or an outright distribution of property, it could disqualify them from Medicaid and other benefits that they might be receiving, and that would be very detrimental to the special needs beneficiary. So what are some final takeaways for today? I don't have to tell you, life is unpredictable. Make sure your trust document gives the trustee flexibility and discretion to act in a variety of situations. Talk to your trustee about your intentions. Make sure you explain to them what your family goals are. Tell them how you want your property to be distributed to your beneficiaries. Provide your trustee with a letter of intent, or a side letter, as I like to call it, for our files. Include examples of specifically how you want your property to be distributed in certain family situations. Monitor and update your plan. I cannot tell you how important this one is. So many of us believe that when we put our plans into a place, our estate plans or our wealth transfer plans, that it's a one-time event. I can tell you it is not. Make sure every few years you go back and you review that plan to make sure it still fits your family situation. Make sure there haven't been any changes in laws that might affect how your plan will ultimately take place. And I know this is a little outside of the trust, but consider lifetime gifts. Imagine the joy that you might feel if you're able to give your beneficiary, whether it's a child, a grandchild, a great-grandchild, transfer your wealth to them now so they can pay off some student loans or maybe make a down payment on the purchase of their first home. Imagine the joy that you might feel when you're there and they can tell you thank you. So with that, I'll tell you thank you. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. And remember, you can't take it with you, but through a trust, you can define how you want your life's work and wealth to continue to benefit the people you love. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I definitely learned something about trust today. I don't know what the rest of you. But our next speaker is Brandon Ebert, the CEO of Be Well Financial. Brandon has been in finance since he graduated from Creighton back in 2003. His vision is to help clients be more successful through detailed planning. Brandon will be talking about your life in 10,000-day increments. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Ebert.
Perfect. As he set this up, I think we have a duty and obligation to talk about investments and estate planning. We have to bring Warren Buffett's name up at least twice. So we've got that taken care of once. I'll take care of the second one. Perfect. All right. So Warren Buffett was sitting in a room similar to this, talking to some college students many years ago, and he said, "How many of you would trade places with me right now?" Now, Warren Buffett is 93 years old. His net worth is $114 billion. All the influence he has, the connections he has, the life he's lived. And how many of those kids you think raised their hand? Not many. Warren Buffett is 93 years old, and the best part about that is Warren would have traded places with anybody in that room if he had the opportunity to. And so I guess I challenge us to think differently today as we think about days and years we lived. If I said 525,600 minutes, would anybody know how long that is? 1 year, well done. If I said 687 days, would anybody know that one? That's a higher level, tougher one maybe. Not 2 years, no, it's 1 year on Mars. If you were to go to Mars, it takes 687 days to go around, but you were close. So we think about that, I think not think about in years, but think about in days. And so we look at these numbers on the screen, what do you think they represent? So 19,913, 25,259, 29,536, and down the road. So you may have a guess of what those days represent. Maybe. I'll give you a hint. So the average of those numbers is 29,006 days. Anybody want to try there? Lifetime. So what this was, my son Corbin did some research for me. He went to KSAL.com, looked at the obituaries, and that was the average numbers of days that people lived for the first 2 weeks in April in obituaries in the Salina Journal, or in KSAL. So 29,000. When we think about that, that's a pretty good number of days, about 4,000 weeks. So when you think about that, I want you to think for a second, what is your most important birthday? Anybody have a guess what your most important birthday is? What's that? First one, that one starts, yeah, I like it. I wrote 10. My son said he just turned 10, he's double digits, he's big time now. My oldest just turned 13, he's a teenager. He's thinking about 16, learn how to drive, 21, all these reasons. I would challenge you, the most important day, birthday of your life, is the day you turn 27 years, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days. Does anybody remember where they were when they turned 27, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days by chance? Does anybody remember where they were on their 21st birthday? At least at the beginning of the day, so we know that one. I challenge you because the day you turn 27 years, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days, that's when you turn 10,000 days old. And I believe that's your most important day in your financial life. The reason being is everything leading up to that is the moment you got to build your education, build your career. And on that day, if you haven't done it yet, you have to start saving for retirement along the way. So we're going to go through each of these birthdays. The second most important birthday is the day you turn 55 years old, 9 months, and 1 day. And that's if you do it right, the day you turn 20,000 days old, your ability to retire and decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. So let's break those down really quickly. So let's start with the first one, what I would call the discover, the first 10,000 days of your lives. And I think when we think about this first 10,000 days, is using your money to educate yourself, putting yourself in the best position to find the best career you're going to be in. What are you good at? What do you like to do? And invest your money towards those types of things. As we think about that, I think it's investing in relationships, your ability to communicate, the people you want to spend your time with. If I were to put it into a chain link example, in this example, you want to be the weakest link in the room. Your job is to surround yourself with people smarter than you, whether they're educators or mentors, or be around as many people as you can. The other way of saying it is be the dumbest person in the room, which I'm pretty good at in a lot of cases. That's what your goal should be at this time. The whole focus of this first 10,000 days should be to increase your surface area for luck. The more things you can do to increase your surface area for luck, that's what you're helping yourself do. Now, when you turn 10,000 days, or if you remember, 27 years, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days, approximately, depending on leap years, that's your chance to start developing your career. And the thing you want to be investing here in is obviously you have to start saving for retirement. At 27, that's your first time if you haven't done it already. If you've done it ahead of time, you're an overachiever, that's great. But that's when you first must start saving for it. We can make financial planning sound really complicated, but it's pretty simple. When I speak to third grade groups, it's always spend less than what you make and put your money left over in the right spots. So it's pretty simple. It's save an emergency fund, have life insurance, have short-term goals, save for retirement, save for education, and I'm contractually required to say save for education for a great institution like this, save for education, and then save for long-term goals and spend the rest. So as we think about that time of life, your job is to be part of something bigger. So find that chain, whether it's working for a great company and invest in those, investing in your income, invest in your career, and spend a lot of time investing in those. When you turn 20,000 days old, or 55 years, 9 months, and 1 day, that's when you get the great chance to decide what you want to do next. And if you've done it right, and you've saved like you're supposed to save, you can retire at 55 if you started your 10,000th day birthday. And you can choose, do I want to keep working? Do I want to retire? Or do I want to do a combination of both? At this point, our lives should be focused on helping others, whether it's our kids or other individuals in our companies, help them achieve everything they want to achieve. So once we get through that stage, your job is to be a link for others. And as we think about that last stage, when you turn 30,000 days old, or approximately age 84 years, my good friend Bill Knox told me it's never too late to start living. It might be too late to start skydiving, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. He also told me that turning age 84 is great because you get to drink all day, sleep in, take naps, and wear pajamas all day long, which sounds exactly like college, which I want to sign up for that if I get a chance to. And as we think about this, I think this quote tells us exactly what we need to do those 10,000 days. The purpose of your life is to discover your gift in the first 10,000 days. The work of your life is to develop it, and the meaning of your life is to give it away. As we go back to Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett's lived for 33,837 days. He's made every day count, and I ask you to do the same. Your days are numbered, make them count. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. I never thought about starting to save for retirement at age 27, so I will definitely use that in the future. Our next speaker is Bob Meyer, who is an advisor of Respected Wealth. Bob has been at Respected Wealth for 38 years, and he is an alumni of Kansas Wesleyan in '73. We're very excited to celebrate Bob as a GW member here at Homecoming Weekend. And so he's on the Alumni Council, he's on the KWU Foundation Board. Today, Bob will be talking about 7 things no one tells you about retirement. So ladies and gentlemen, Bob Meyer.
Thank you. Glad to have the opportunity to be here. Great job, Brandon. I just came from a foundation board meeting, which was why I was a little late, and the right thing to say was save for education by introducing Kansas Wesleyan. And I can tell you I've already achieved one of the goals you mentioned, which is I'm the weakest link in the room today. Thank you. So you've heard some really good advice. I just made some notes of things as I'm working with people preparing for retirement, talking about retirement and beginning retirement and living through retirement that they never thought about ahead of time. So you've heard great information this morning about things you can do. And my discussion point here is, once you know about things you can do them. Because plan ahead. Work with a lot of people who are retiring. And sometimes they'll come to us, the year before they're gonna retire and say, I'm retiring next year, so I'm ready to talk with you and plan for retirement. Well, they're about 30, 40 years too late. Yes, it's never too late to begin planning, and yes, you should save for retirement when you get your first paycheck. That's when you start. So, a lot of people, and I've had people say, well, I can retire. I said, when do you want to retire? I can retire when I'm 65 or 66 or whatever that is. That's the wrong answer. You can retire when you have enough income sources, resources, and assets to maintain the lifestyle that you want to have throughout the rest of your life. That's the end game. You have various sources of income. Social Security is one of them, but that's not what you need to depend on. So retirement is a huge lifestyle change, and some people don't really appreciate that until they're there. I got some statistics a while back, and I'm not a sociologist, and frankly, I didn't vet the statistics, but I believe them from living real life. The highest divorce rate decade in our society today is the over 60 generation. And at first glance, that really surprised me, but I've seen too many examples of it that maybe it doesn't surprise me. Because all of a sudden, you're living at home with somebody that you haven't been with all day, every day, and one of you went to work, or both of you went to work, and home is where you spent some common time together until you got to escape the next day and go to work. It's even more exacerbating. I'm serious, this happened. It's even more exacerbating if one of them was traveling a lot, like most of the time on the road. Well, guess what the person who stayed home, the spouse who stayed home did? They took care of everything. They paid the bills, they took care of all the documents, they did all that kind of stuff. And then the one that's on the road comes home and says, okay, I'm taking over, I'm doing this. Okay, get out of my sandbox. I know how to do this. So, retire to something, not from something. And it's really serious. I have a checklist. I have a few with me if anybody's interested. It's just a generic checklist. But what are you going to do when you're retired? You have the first 30 days planned out. You have the first year planned out. What are you going to spend your time doing? What are you going to spend? When are you going to be working with charities? What charities are you going to be involved with? What are you going to do with the family, with the kids, with the grandkids? So plan what you're going to do when you retire. It's very important. Most people find they can retire and they adapt really quickly, but some really struggle. Some really struggle. The big deal is it's going to cost more than you expect. I had, after dinner, had a conversation with a couple friends last night, and it was at Yaya's and where we were staying, and she made the comment, she said, I'm probably going to be retired for 30 years. Okay, many people are retired for 30 years. She said, I retired at 62. Okay, think back 30 years ago, what did things cost? Not as much as today. I don't exactly remember. It's going to cost more than you expect. A lot of people then say, okay, here's my retirement budget, and they're making that budget out when they don't have any car payments, the house is paid for, no credit card bills, and they just look at what it costs to live there. They're not taking into consideration 2 years from now when they need to buy a car, 4 years from now when one of them says, I can't stand the kitchen, we need to get that remodeled, the deck's falling apart, that's going to cost $20,000 to fix. All those things happen, and they don't quit because you retire. They accelerate because your house is probably older. Another important part of looking ahead, and so plan and put that into the budget. Another important thing is many people tell us that we're in the home we're going to live in the rest of our lives. Love it. It's great. My doctor says walking the stairs is really a good thing. Good. And all of a sudden, they're one knee surgery away one knee surgery away, excuse me, from one of them realizing this isn't easy. You know, this isn't easy. So, okay, well, that's easy. We'll just downsize. Okay, I don't know if any of you have looked at buying a new home, a downsized home in today's marketplace. You can downsize the square footage. You can get everything on one level you need, but you're not down pricing. You are up pricing. Okay. You have a question? A couple more quick things. Income tax planning. A lot of people are shocked. Please start thinking in your 50s about what's the taxation of my retirement going to be. Because people get shocked by how much they're going to pay in taxes. They think that they won't pay as much. And I've had about 5 conversations in the last 2 weeks with people where we're talking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I've been talking about this for years, I can't believe how much income tax we're going to pay. 85% of your Social Security benefits are going to be taxed, all of your retirement accounts are going to be taxed, so you need to be planning by the time you're in your 50s, how do we diversify our tax structure? The last thing I would suggest is, you've heard some good things about trust and estate planning, and it's wise. You need to get with those people, get your estate plan cleaned up, get your beneficiary's name, and keep on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for educating us all on retirement. So we all know what to do when we finally retire, right?
Yes.
All right. So our last speaker this morning is none other than Charles Spencer. Charles is the Senior Vice President and Director of Credit Review at National Bank Holding. He is an excellent source when it comes to credit quality and risk management practices in the banking field. Charles will be talking about recent bank failures. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Spencer.
Well, first of all, what I like to do with these is I like to set the level of expectation, and we are not dealing with a situation today where we save the best for last. So I just want to get that out there. If we're in agreement, we'll move forward quickly. I have to teach myself to look over here to keep track of my clock, but just a few comments about recent bank failures that are all over the news, all over social media. So I just wanted to just kind of touch on a few things that happened that kind of led to those bank failures. In March of 2023, we had 2 very large financial institution failures. The first one and the largest one was Silicon Valley Bank, failed on March 10th. And when it failed, it was the second largest bank failure in U.S. history. It has been subsequently purchased. The assets were purchased by First Citizens. And then 2 days later, we had Signature Bank fail, the one up in New York. And then it, distinguished itself by being the 3rd largest bank failure in U.S. history and was subsequently purchased by Flagstaff Bank. There were, like I said, there were 2 very large institutions. Silicon Valley was $209 billion, and Signature Bank was $110 billion. Now, the thing that's important about that, more than their asset size, is their deposit level. Silicon Valley had $175 billion in deposits, and Signature Bank had $88 billion in deposits, so just kind of keep that in mind. One of the things I kind of want to let you know is the commonality between both institutions. It's really important. Both were concentrated within the tech industry in terms of their client base. Real important to keep that in mind. Both were concentrated in uninsured deposits. I think most people in this room are familiar about that $250,000 level that the FDIC provides insurance for. That's another important fact. Both were crypto friendly, very important fact there, keep that in mind. Old banking, there's an old saying in banking that I learned 30 years ago that it goes, concentrations kill. And both of these institutions had concentrations all over the place, and I'll touch on a couple of those later on. And again, the majority of those deposits were not FDIC insured. Additional commonalities were both primary reason both of them failed is both were subject to umbrella deposits. So once the word got out these banks were in trouble, good folks like you and I, it's like, wow, I need my cash, I'm gonna take all my cash out.
just understand really no bank can withstand a run on deposits. So
Again, that's really what led to them running out of cash. They didn't have liquidity to do that, and that kind of leads to what they should have been doing, which I'll talk about later. It's also important to note that this crisis was somewhat unique in that it really wasn't driven by credit-related issues. It has everything to do with how banks manage their liquidity risk and their interest rate risk. That's what got those guys in trouble. So if you think back to the financial crisis, you know, the housing crisis, nobody thought real estate values would drop, and that led to a series of events that led to a crisis. So again, these past two failures, in the sense they weren't credit related, they were liquidity and interest rate related. Again, swift withdrawals of deposits, they couldn't raise any capital. Once the word got out that they were in trouble, you know, they couldn't raise any cash to improve their liquidity position. And then that subsequently just led to material declines in their stock value. And again, we're talking about a real short time frame that essentially the values of both companies went away. In the interest of time, I'm gonna focus on Silicon Valley Bank because it was the largest. And there's just, again, a ton of information out there to back up some of these statements. At the time it fell, it was the 16th largest bank in the US, but given that size, it took about 36 hours for that bank to fail. So just think about that for a second. A $200 billion bank, it took a day and a half for them to fail. Again, one of the reasons was that the institution was known at the time as a major tech player out in California. So that's where a lot of venture capitalists would use that bank to raise their money and would deposit those monies in that institution. So that was really what they were known for. So they provided financing for many of the startups across the country. So the question is, some of you might be asking, what went wrong? Well, I'm glad you asked. Tech money, from a risk perspective, is considered risky, more risky than my normal deposits because they tend to move quickly. And not only do they move quickly, we're talking about large sums of money, millions and millions of dollars moving very quickly in and out of an institution. When things deteriorated, folks were very quick to take their money out. I mean, they had clients that had $500 million deposited. So when the word got out that this bank was not doing very well, they were running in to grab their money out. In 2018, and again, some folks are using this argument. I'm not necessarily using that. One of the things that led to the downturn was in 2018, some of the regulation was relaxed. So these banks, both of these banks that fell, were under less regulatory scrutiny than they normally would. Now, there are a lot of bigger problems in that, but you may hear people say that led to it. I'm not necessarily in that camp. What was a problem that nobody said anything about, if you go back and look at SVB's financials, explosive growth in a very short period of time. Their deposits tripled in 2 years. Again, nobody stopped to ask the question, well, what's going on here? And we leave that up to management, and hopefully our regulators caught it. But in this case, nobody did. Again, most of their deposits, they were not insured. Again, it basically led to that panic. Folks started taking their money out, and the bank subsequently failed. So you may be asking yourself, again, to wrap up, what do we do now? What do we do about this now? So to me, what I think will happen, in my humble opinion, is the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have investigations, you're going to have hearings, you're going to have a lot of this. But really, it falls to the management of the institution. That's the problem. So again, please take your money out of your mattress, put it back into your institution. It's safe. And again, no need to panic, and I'll close with that.
Thank you, Charles, for educating us on why banks are having so many failures, and it's crazy to think that a successful bank can close in 36 hours. So that's one key takeaway I got from that. So at this time, we'd like to open it up for questions. So for our panel of speakers, so if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll answer any questions. They will answer any questions you got.
I went for Charlie.
Sure.
Charlie, I'm not, giving you this question since I'm getting a divorce, but you correct me by saying people that are going to go to Medicare, Medicaid to get a divorce. Can you walk us through that a little bit more?
Sure. So I actually have two of these cases going on right now. One of them's a friendly and one of them's not a friendly. But it's kind of crazy because they both work sort of the same way. In any divorce, you have a division of assets. If you have kids, you also have child-related issues, but the primary adult issue between the partners in a marriage is the division of their debts and their assets. Medicaid requires, what do we call it? I think it's the same thing, it's the division of assets, where a community spouse, a spouse that's not going to be institutionalized or not going to be qualifying for Medicaid, the community spouse is allowed to segregate certain assets that belong to that spouse that then don't count for the institutionalized spouse and don't have to be spent down before Medicaid will kick in, and that institutionalized spouse will qualify. There's a 5-year look back on that spend down. So anything that's been spent in the last 5 years, if there are disqualifying expenditures according to Medicaid standards, you've got to go back and recapture that money. For example, you gave away $20,000 to your grandkids, and next year you go to the nursing home. Well, you got to go find $20,000 and spend that on your care before Medicaid will start to pay. Now, a divorce is a way to kind of cut that 5-year window out. And Medicaid is wise to this. Medicaid is starting to say, well, if that division of assets and debts isn't strictly equal, 50-50 equal, they're going to say, well, that divorce is a disqualified transfer. There are ways around that, and there are ways that, in one of the cases I've been working on recently, we've done almost like a 90-10 split of assets and equalized the estate through a special needs trust that has to be set up after the divorce. And I've run this by the Medicaid people in Topeka. It passes. They came to the hearing and testified and told the judge it passes. So I'm certain that we're going to get away with that one. But that's the issue. The divorce can be a tool, and this, I don't know whether it's any kind of contributing factor to the statistics that Bob was mentioning. But it certainly is something that I've seen in my career, and I'm seeing more of there, and hearing about guidance from KWU on Medicaid planning for that. So, did I hit somewhere in the red wrong there?
Anybody else?
I have a question for Julie. Julie, what do you think are 2 or 3 things most misunderstood about trust for families?
Most misunderstood. I would say primarily maybe the complication that people perceive trust. They just perceive it as complicated, and they don't want to have to mess with that, and then you have to transfer your assets into a trust, quote unquote, and oh, that just seems so cumbersome and time consuming. So I would say that's probably one of the primary. We also run into a lot where they go through the process of setting up a trust, and then maybe they don't take the next steps of transferring those assets into the trust. So a trust is only as good as the funding or what assets the trust owns. So you can have the best estate plan in the world, but if you haven't funded that trust, it means nothing. Is that helpful?
I might add one more too. I think it's the amount of money people have. Like, oh, I don't own this much. I don't need a trust. And I would say it's more about the situation rather than the amount of money.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing I would say is cost. That you get concerned about, oh, they are going to be more expensive. And they are to get set up a trust. But the cost and the time investment ahead of time is worth a lot less than having to clean it up after it's done.
Yep. And to follow up on that, the cost is just being paid up front versus after the fact. You're still paying your beneficiaries. You're still going to be paying that cost, whether it's good to go through probate, or you don't even have a will in place to go through an intestate probate, so you're still paying on the back end rather than the front end. And the front end is when you have control. So pay when you have control to put that plan in place. Yeah.
So would that also be true with the situation they were just talking about, with Medicaid, if you have a trust in place, and one of your spouse or yourself end up in a nursing home, would that protect you from that as well?
So, excuse me. So there are some situations where a trust could assist. Trusts are still subject to that same 5-year look back period that he's talking about, and so if you transfer assets into an irrevocable trust, you still have to wait that 5 years. So there is some planning that trust can facilitate with Medicaid planning, but it isn't always as cut and dry and as easy as what there is a misperception out there that, oh, I just put my money into a trust and it's protected from Medicaid. Well, that's not exactly right, because there are some downfalls to that, and that if you're going to do that, you lose a very significant amount of control over those assets. And so it's just something that you really need to work through with your tax professional and the estate planning professional and how that might really work.
If I can just add one quick thing, spend a little bit of time, energy, and money up front to get things in place, and you'll save a lot of money in the long run, and it'll be some of the best money you've ever spent.
I'll keep asking questions. This could be for any of the families. I know there's a certain dollar amount that a family can give to their children, threshold that is non-taxable to the family and to the child. Can you talk about that amount, what that process is, a one-time gift?
Are you talking about annually? There's an annual, so you could give $16,000 to anybody, actually, not just a child, and it's not subjected to gift taxes. So, and as a spouse, so if you're married and you want to give your child, you each can give your child that same amount, so basically doubles. But that's an annual amount, and that is a gift that you can make to anybody. And then there's the state tax exemption amount, or the gift exemption amount that's now about $12 million that you can gift either after death or during life. You can gift that amount over your lifetime and will not have to pay state or gift taxes.
If I could ask one quick thing to that, I get asked this sometimes, and if you gift money to someone, it's not tax deductible to you, nor is it taxable to them.
Well, who could you give money to to be tax deductible? Any organizations you give money to, like Kansas Wesleyan?
Absolutely, that's a great point.
Brandon's on our payroll.
All right, well, that concludes our lecture series. Let's give a round of applause.